Texas has an opportunity to lead. It should secure the top spot by reducing taxes as much as possible. And that starts with restraining government spending, just like with anything else. And I really think that that Texas should phase out its school district M&O property taxes by using surplus methods or broadening the sales tax base and looking at a higher rate, but getting rid of taxes in general and having a net tax cut. Hello. Welcome to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. We've got some big issues to talk about, so I just want to jump right into it. But first of all, let me say thank you for listening, sharing this with all your friends and family, subscribing to my newsletter and the podcast, wherever you get it. Thank you so much. It's a huge help. We're almost to the end of 2024, almost to 2025. So a lot of big things happening next year as well. You don't want to miss it. So let's get ready. All right. So number one, Federal Reserve interest rate decision. In the news, the Federal Reserve is expected to reduce its federal funds balance sheet this week by 25 basis points to a range of 4.25 to 4.5%, which they're having a meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday, signaling a cautious but continued monetary policy easing. Policymakers likely will pause additional cuts in early 2025 to assess the economic trajectory amid persistent inflation and a strong labor market. I think you're right that this is the danger of premature easing. We've seen what happened during the 1970s. I actually wanted to say to the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, they had a good chart that they kind of outlined. Here's CPI inflation, what's been happening over the last few years compared to what happened in the 70s. And we're seeing something very similar. And I'm worried that will be repeated this time around. Of course, inflation was also contributed to by an oil shock back then. But that changes relative prices, not the overall level of prices. And so I think that this is really only up to the Fed. They've got to make sure that they're not going to continue to repeat the mistakes of the past. They should get rid of their balance sheet bloat that's $7 trillion and get rid of that as quickly as possible. Because remember, that is really what is driving a lot of the manipulation and the overprices and the bubbles across many asset markets. And this, of course, sends mixed signals to the markets. It seems like every time the Fed does something or says something or a Federal Reserve official says something, that you see this volatility in the stock market and other markets. And that's because they're having too much influence. There's too much in control of what's happening by the Federal Reserve. I want to see the day where we end the Federal Reserve. But until then, we need monetary rules that are in place, kind of like a Taylor rule or a money growth rule or even a balance sheet rule, I think might be good. Anyway, something to watch there as well. Number two, Trump's first 100-day predictions. In the news, with President-elect Donald Trump taking office next month, many seek insights into the administration's early priorities. Several sources share that immigration will be prioritized at the start of the year, while tax reform will be prioritized later in the year. My take on this is that voters care about the economy. If the election showed us anything, it's Americans went out and voted about inflation and the failure of Bidenomics and wanted a new direction. So I'm hopeful that we can get something to preserve the Trump tax cuts as quickly as possible, while also making sure that we're cutting government spending and restraining the growth over time to provide opportunities to promote prosperity. I think this could happen from, the DOE's, the Department of Government Efficiency that I've talked about before, and I hope to help with that effort some. But when you look at Russ Vought being at OMB and some others within the administration who are fiscal hawks, I hope that they will consider key reforms to be made so we can restrain government spending and get this back on some sort of course of sustainability when you talk about the budget and just sanity just in general, right? One thing I am concerned about though is, Russ Vought is really focused on a lot of discretionary cuts and restraint. But remember, discretion is only about maybe a third, if not even less than the overall budget, especially if you take Department of Defense off the table. And so that's only a small portion of the budget. It's not the main driving forces, which are Social Security and Medicare. So I'm hopeful that they can also look at that. But the first 100 days also should be about deregulation. Deregulation is going to be huge. I mean, under the Biden administration, we've seen $1.8 trillion in hidden taxes from regulations being put on the economy. No wonder so many people are concerned about the economy, right? And so I think that going through and removing those regulations, if not even more than that, because there's too many regulations stifling the economy, I think that could be a great thing to do within the first 100 days, opening up energy exploration and oil production. I think will also be a big part of that. All right. Number three, TikTok ban problems. In January 19th, the day President-elect Donald Trump takes office, really January 20th here, a TikTok ban will go into effect unless the platform breaks ties with Chinese parent company ByteDance. The law will require app stores and internet browsers to stop distributing TikTok or face penalties. My take on this is that government shouldn't be the gatekeeper. The ban, it could threaten Americans' right to free expression guaranteed by the First Amendment, where millions of people are using this not only for their own personal use, but also for their businesses and getting information out there. So this could hit a lot of small businesses in particular, as well. I do share my stuff on TikTok. I'm not a huge user of TikTok in general for a number of reasons. One of those is because there's already a lot of competition in the marketplace, and I get more information from X than others. But I think that these are not reasons to ban TikTok overall. Allow for consumers to make the choices. Instead, just like with social media and other things that the government is trying to come in and ban and take away the empowerment of parents, I think this should be up to consumers and individuals to decide on how they want to do this. This is going to harm a lot of small businesses. And instead, we should be unleashing the free market so that there are more competitors. There's more opportunities and choices for people to go to. If they want to leave TikTok and go somewhere else, go somewhere else. But otherwise, I think government should get out of the way. And then there are better ways to deal with China. We talked about before with opening up trade with other countries, especially our allies, and opening up or reducing the burden of getting into the tech industry and social media would also allow for more competition, which would potentially reduce the number of people that are on TikTok. So I think that this is way overblown, and we need to go into a different direction. All right. Number 4, state tax competitiveness. Texas, Kansas, and Louisiana on the move. All right. In the news, the 2025 State Tax Competitive Index put out by the Tax Foundation reveals how well states structure their tax systems or not so well. Okay. Texas ranks 7th overall. Kansas holds at 25th and Louisiana lags at 40th. While each state has made strides in tax reform, challenges remain. Texas benefits from no income tax, but struggles with its high property taxes and burdensome corporate franchise tax. Kansas shows modest improvements, but still faces high sales taxes and stagnant income tax policies. Louisiana, though improving with 2024 reforms, continues to grapple with high sales tax burdens and complex tax structures that they need to find a way to reduce those. So my take on this is that Texas has an opportunity to lead. It should secure the top spot by reducing taxes as much as possible. And that starts with restraining government spending, just like with anything else. And I really think that that Texas should phase out its school district M&O property taxes by using surplus methods or broadening the sales tax base and looking at a higher rate, but getting rid of taxes in general and having a net tax cut and focusing on spending restraint for the future. So that way we can have lower government and size of government over time. In Kansas, look, they're staying competitive with some bold moves this year on those things. But what's problematic is there's not a key sense of fiscal restraint. That's something that needs to be done. And they need to continue to find ways to eliminate their income tax. I would say use the surplus buy down method, restrain government spending, use surpluses to reduce tax rates on income taxes. I think that's the best way to go. But in general, Kansas has got to keep going down that path. And Louisiana, look, they took some bold steps to build momentum from what happened this year during a special session to flatten their corporate income tax rate, flatten their individual income tax rate, eliminate their franchise tax and other things. And while there is a growth rate limit, what they're calling a growth limit, put in a constitutional amendment, which is a very broad constitutional amendment. I think that there needs to be more pressure on limiting spending there, so that way that there is an approach to buying down income taxes over time to zero. I mean, that's ultimately got to be the goal. Income taxes are distorting the decision to work and more economic growth and prosperity, and they should be eliminated entirely. And so when you look at places like Texas, I mean, those are some big places where you'd have number 7. If you look at the top ones, right, it's New Hampshire, Florida, Tennessee. I mean, they're all right at the top. They have no income taxes. Okay. So that's a big step in the right direction. Okay. Number 5, Texas property taxes elimination. In the news, over the past 26 years, Texas property taxes have been increased by an unsustainable 330%, far outpacing inflation growth of 136%. My new research at the Texans for Fiscal Responsibility explains how eliminating property taxes will help Texans prosper. And I do this by talking about the injustice of the property tax system, how it's a burden on families, whether they own a home or have a home. I don't think they really own it because they're paying rent to the government, especially if they can come and put a tax lien or take your property entirely. And so you don't really own it. You're paying rent to the government, or you're renting an apartment or a house or something else. You're still paying that tax through a form of higher rent. Or these families have businesses who are paying taxes on it. So we should be eliminating all of them instead of picking winners and losers through something like the homestead exemption, raising it like they did last year 2 years ago now. Oh, no, it was last year to, raised it from $40,000 to $100,000. Like that helps for a short period of time, but not over time. You really got to focus on reducing property tax rates and freezing those school M&O taxes. Okay. So the strategies for reform here are not only to look at the no new revenue rate, meaning that if the local governments want to raise property taxes $1, they should have to go to the taxpayer to do so. So appraisals go up. That means the tax rate's got to go down. So that way the total revenue that they're bringing in increases by 0. And then if they want to go above that, well, then they go out to the voters and they say, okay, this is why. They make their case of why they want to do that. And so in addition to that, though, to actually eliminate property taxes, I think you got to use the surplus buy down method, but its focuses with spending restraint and using surpluses for the state to reduce a school M&O property tax to 0 over time, which could take about 10 years. And then local governments could do that for their local property taxes, which would take longer. And many of them may not have the sales tax base to do so. But I think when you look at some other options that are out there and including a transfer tax on the sale of property where you pay it just one time, maybe of 2%, you could shorten that period of time that you can eliminate all property taxes within maybe a couple of decades. And so I think that's one good approach there. The other one is redesigning the sales tax system or the tax system in general to where the state broadens its sales tax base, maybe raises the rate a little bit in order to eliminate the school M&O property tax. That would cover about half the property tax system. But of course, when you're broadening the sales tax base for the state, that also broadens the sales tax base for local governments as well. So I don't want them to get a free fall of more money coming in or windfall. That's what I want to say. Instead, they should use that extra money to reduce their own property taxes. And then if you wanted to raise the sales tax rate a little bit in order to get more revenue, to eliminate the rest, I think they should be able to do that. And so by base broadening, reining in government spending and having a net tax cut, the tax rate wouldn't need to be excessively high, could stay competitive, and there would be a path to eliminating the property taxes across the state in a very short period of time, where the state is funding 100% the school M&O property tax, but all the other local governments are funding their own. So you're separating the two. There's not a redistribution of income across the state from the state government to the local governments. There's not that subsidy. It really is keeping those isolated. And the state already runs the school M&O property tax with their school finance formulas. So I think that you'll find a lot of good information in that report at Texans for Fiscal Responsibility. So be sure to check that out as well. So that's the information I got for you today. Please ping me anytime you want. You can check me out at vanceginn.com. Also, remember, you can get my newsletter in your inbox every time it comes out at vanceginn.substack.com. But until next time, God bless you and let people prosper.